Yo, yo, yo. This is candibknittin. I'm Candy, and I be knitting, and I've been knitting. Today I want to talk to you all about the ranunculus. And in case you didn't notice, I am wearing the ranunculus I first spoke about a couple of weeks ago. It's a pattern by Midori Hirose, and I knitted this as a part of the hashtag Missed the Boat Cal 2023 being hosted by Sarah Dawson, aka at the Black Sheep Knitter, or at Black Sheep Knitter, and I thought I would just tell y'all my, love to hate to love again relationship with this pattern, and let you know all about it and all about the process of making this and the other one I have sitting right beside me. So I'm going to get into the details all about this, but I'm going to start at the very beginning with my very, very first ranunculus. So I started knitting in 2020. If you go back a couple weeks ago, I had a video, I think it was about, knit-alongs, and I spoke about how the ranunculus, in case you never heard of it, it's by Midori Hirose. It's been one of the top patterns on Ravelry since I started knitting, and it came out in 2017. And we're now in 2023, about to be 2024. And I just remember first starting to knit and watching YouTubers, and everyone had not only knit one, but knit multiple of them. And I just could not wrap my brain around it. Like, I was watching videos, I was reading the Ravelry project pages, I was in Facebook groups, and I'm just like, what is the deal? I don't get it. Like, people be like, oh, it's so fun. And it just, like, people are like, I knit my entire family this sweater. And I'm just like, what's fun about it? And, they'd be like, it's potato chip knitting. I'm like, what does that mean? Or, they'd be like, you can use whatever yarn you want. But I'm just like, I've literally just started knitting like 2 weeks ago. I don't know what that means. I don't even know what it means to knit a garment, let alone be like, use whatever yarn. I'm just like, really? How does a pattern work where you can use whatever yarn you want? And a lot of people are drawn to this pattern because, in particular, not only can you use whatever yarn you want, but if you use like a lace weight to a fingering yarn, you can use one skein, which a lot of people have, single skeins in their stashes. And I'm just like, okay. And I just really could not, just by the basis of people singing the praises of the pattern and no one saying anything negative about it. Everyone's just like, they just love it. And I'm just like, it's got to be something to this. And so I was like, I think it's like $8 to $10 for the pattern. I'm just like, you know what? Curiosity will always get the better of me. Let me just go buy if I never knitted, I'm out, $8 to $10. It's not, ideal, but at least then I'll know for sure what's going on with this pattern. So the very first ranunculus I knit, you get this pattern, and the pattern is literally 15 pages long. And I'm just like, what have I gotten myself into? Don't be nervous. There's about 3 pages in the pattern that you really absolutely need. It's a lot of pictures. It's a very thorough pattern. It is definitely written with a more of a beginner to adventurous beginner knitter in mind. But it definitely was intimidating for me, and I'm just like flipping through all. I'm just like, there was charts and graphs, and this was the first pattern I ever bought. Period. Everything else I, did a YouTube tutorial here. I'd read a blog post here. I'd never gotten a proper pattern, and so that it's not out of the realm that patterns do take up a lot of pages when they're paid for, fleshed out. The pattern comes in, I think 10 to 11 sizes. But most of the pages are charts of stitch counts, which you don't necessarily need for, if you're knitting your particular size. If you're knitting multiple different sizes, you might need that full blown. Like the first page of the pattern is just a paragraph telling you how great the pattern is. It's very much like when you go get a recipe online and it's just like, I just want to learn how to make pumpkin pie, and they're just like, in 1922 my granddaddy, grew pumpkins, and you're just like, just tell me how to make this. And so once I got over that fear, get to the first step. The first step is a cast on, and it's meant to be, the whole idea of ranunculus is that it's recommended with what I would call an extreme amount of positive ease, anywhere from 10 to 20 centimeters of positive ease, 4 to 8 inches in US terms. And so you have a very wide cast on neck that's very stretchy. And she has a particular cast on method she uses in the pattern, which she has a YouTube link to. And she has YouTube tutorials for everything in the pattern, including like German short rows. It was my first time learning German short rows, and this pattern actually taught me German short rows, which I'm internally grateful for. But this cast on just blew my mind. I had just like the Amazon, because it's on 10 millimeter, not 10 millimeter, US size 10 needles, which are 5 millimeter needles. And so you have a relatively thick needle, and I was using lace weight yarn because I was like, oh, I heard this pattern's good for lace weight, and I have a single skein of lace weight yarn. I want to do this. And they were like the really cheap needles you get from Amazon that are like 12 needles for like $10. And so I had this incredibly thin yarn on this incredibly thick needle. I'm trying to watch this YouTube video to learn this cast on. And my first time knitting at that gauge of like a very thin yarn on a very thick needle. And I literally made a mess of it. And I am a very efficient and thoughtful when it comes to my yarn use. But it was so badly tangled that it ended up in the trash. So that's the story of my first ranunculus. I threw it in the trash. Just the cast on edge. I didn't throw the whole skein of yarn in the trash, but it was just wrapped around this 10 millimeter needle, and I was like, I can't do this, and it's making it not fun. And once it's not fun, I don't want to do that anymore. And so I was like really trying to figure out online, like, what is with this cast on? Am I going to completely destroy this sweater if I don't do the cast on as it's described in the pattern? And couldn't really find a good answer, but my answer is always just try it and see what happens. And so I just got an 8 millimeter needle out and some DK weight yarn and did a long tail cast on. And that's my second ranunculus. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm so much happier. And, you're using, the pattern calls for 10 millimeter needles. So there is a lot of wiggle room with the cast on. So it wasn't that big of a deal. But I could not. We'll get back to that cast on though. There's a nice bookend for that. So my second ranunculus, I used some Lion Brand Hand Dyed Heaven, which is now discontinued Lion Brand. And it's a DK weight yarn. I used 2 skeins and knit the size 1 in the pattern, because while it is definitely sold to be oversized, that is not my preferred silhouette. I like, I have my days where I want to be a little bit more comfy cozy, but if I'm, wearing a sweater, I like it to be a little bit more fitted. And I don't mind a cropped look. So I was like, I'll just go for the size 1 in the pattern. I have a 38 to 40 inch bust, depending on the day of the week, or the day of the month rather. And I think the smallest the size 1 is meant to be like a 40 something inch bust. And so I was just like, I'll just have 0 to negative ease in the pattern, and that's fine by me, because I just wanted it done as quickly. I also wanted to make the smallest size because I wanted to be done as quickly as possible, just so I could get an idea of what this pattern was about. And if you go back to my Instagram, when I knit that first one, I compared it to childbirth, which I have experienced twice. And because the beginning part was such a struggle for me, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. You go from this cast on, then you go into a twisted rib collar, then you go into this lace work yoke. And there's nothing particularly hard. It just takes a lot of concentration and literally, reading the pattern line by line of what you need to do next, because I don't know if these motifs have technical, knitting definition names, but the pattern itself doesn't tell you, oh, do a blah, blah, blah stitch. It tells you, you know, purl this, put your needle into here, pull this loop. You know, there's no like shortcut names for anything. And so it's a lot of reading and just literally doing exactly what the pattern tells you to do. And it caused a lot of anxiety for me. And so it was a lot of thought went into the yoke. Not only that, there's a moment in the yoke, especially when you're creating these, I guess you could call them like 4-leaf clovers. There's like lace motif where there's 4, and ended up being off by 1 stitch. Did not know how to fix it. Could not be bothered to fix it because I was like, I just want to be done with this. But then you get to these, I would they be called a smock stitch? Let me know. But there's a part where you have to count which stitches on your needle. Like it's like go between the 2nd and 3rd stitch, or go between the 1st and 2nd stitch. And I don't know if it's because I cheat at Monopoly or what, but it was like I could not count. I kept counting the stitch I had just knit, you know, kind of like, you know, you're playing Monopoly or Trouble or Sorry, and you count the block that you're on before you continue to count. And it just was not meshing with my brain. But then you get through this yoke, you split for sleeves, and you can, the pattern has it in it where you can do a short sleeve version where you literally just bind off the sleeve right here. You don't even have to do sleeves. You don't put anything on hold. And I'm just like, that's fine by me. So you bind off these stitches and then you just knit the body. And then next thing you know, you're knitting on size 10 needles, fingering weight yarn, and you just have to knit to whatever length you want. And I just knit until I run out of yarn. And I was like, wow, okay. And that wasn't so bad once you get into that stockinette piece. And then I was finished with it and I put it on. I was like, this is actually kind of cute. Okay. But because of that, those just mental hurdles I went to, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I ended up giving that ranunculus to my niece, because I just was like, every time I look at this, I think of how pain. And it's literally nothing wrong with the pattern. It was just me as a relatively new knitter doing my first like big boy pattern. And so left a bad taste in my mouth, but it was like, it's a pattern I bought, I now own it. I paid, my $10 for it, and it's really popular. I'm just like, I still want to understand this pattern. And so it's always been on my list to reknit. And also, I'm not a person who reknits a lot of things. Like I knit one thing and I move on to the next. That's why I don't purchase a lot of patterns unless it's like just I need this pattern, like the blanket I was talking about last week. But in general, like I'm just like, I'm not gonna go and knit the same thing over and over again. And so that was about over a year ago at this point. That was last summer. And so this fall actually, Sarah is like, oh, let's do this Miss the Boat Cow, because she's never knit a ranunculus before. But she was like, everyone's welcome to do it though. And so it's mostly for people who have never knit the ranunculus, but I feel like I've gained so much in the past year of knitting. And the first time I knit it, I don't think I really embraced the process that it did feel like knitting it for the first time. So that brings me to my third ranunculus I'm wearing right now. Once again, I did the size 1 because I like that kind of fitted silhouette. I don't really like things hanging off my shoulders. And I did a German twisted cast on because I was just like, I cannot, I just really want a positive experience this time, so I'm not even going to try. And so I did that. The only other note about the pattern is that it involves twisted rib, which does not come very naturally to me, but what's happened every single time is that I get into it and I'm like, I really don't like this, but then I've already started, and so I'm like, I might as well just keep going because I want it to be uniform. And so I add, I don't really like the look of the rolled stockinette sleeve, and so I add just the same amount of twisted rib rows on the sleeves that I do on the neckline, so it's nice and uniform. Knit the yoke to pattern for the size 1. I knit the body, and what I do is when I knit the body, I stop when I slit for sleeves, pull from the center of the ball, knit my my sleeve caps or what have you, and then I weigh my yarn. And once I go in a round, I weigh my yarn again, and I know how much yarn takes a round, and I know how many rows I can knit for the body, so I'm not playing yarn chicken. And so I knit that much. And also there's ribbing I'm not going to stand because my cameraman will have a heart attack if I stand up right now. But the bottom has ribbing, and the pattern calls for 3¼ inches of ribbing at the bottom. And so I just do some maths to figure out how many rows per 3¼ inches, and I stop when I have that much yarn left and start doing my rib. And so with this sweater, this is how much yarn I have left, which is about 2 to 3 grams of yarn, which doesn't bother me. I probably could have knit maybe 2 more rounds, which wasn't going to make a big difference. But the big difference this time when I knitted, I did the German cast on, but I did the pattern. I intentionally bought these needles with the idea that I was going to conquer the ranunculus, and this is a 16-inch 5mm no, not 16 inch, this is 20 inches circular needle from Addy. And I actually got this on clearance, and I saw it and I was just like, oh, this will be perfect, because like I was saying before, the thick Amazon needles I were using was just not working, and I find this pattern with the thinner yarn just works better in a smaller circumference, so you're not like stretching out your stitches going around and stuff. So that made a huge difference. The yarn on this one is I mentioned this on the last episode, but I'll mention again. This is Bumblebee Acres Fiber Farm on their Coquette sock base, and I got this in a D-stash. And the colorway, I misspoke on the last time I spoke about this. I called it the Calcifer yarn, but it's called May All Your Bacon Burn, which Calcifer said, and it's supposed to be inspired by Howl's Moving Castle. And when I saw it, I was like, I gotta have it because reasons. But I really like it, and I was just like, I can't imagine these just being socks, because I have witnessed, and we as a culture have witnessed, a lot of fire-themed stuff over the years. And yes, you have the red and the orange, and you have some black and gray from the fire. And that would just be like a slam dunk. It's like he's fire. But then there's like, when I was knitting, there was just these little pops of pinks and like really, really deep purples. If you remember the scene in the movie where he gets really, really big and angry. And it was like, oh wow, this is actually feels like someone watched the film and was inspired and really did that character justice. So I really feel like I'm wearing like a Calcifer sweater. Not only that, this Coquette base is very different from what I have experienced in other sock yarns. It's 75% superwash Corriedale wool and 25% nylon, and it's a 3-ply, which I'm used to more of like a 4 and sometimes even like 8-ply sock yarn that's really like tightly wound. But when I pulled this out, I realized just how kind of plump it was, and it has a toothiness to it that really feels like it lends itself well to knitting garments. And so it is super wash, but it just feels so much more like structured. I'm going to show you guys the next ranunculus I'm working on, and then maybe you'll see the difference. But it has like this, it feels very like structured and fitted on my body, and I appreciate that, especially from a super wash yarn. So I guess I'll compare and contrast with my next ranunculus, which will be technically my 4th, but it'll be my 3rd actual finished ranunculus. And this, if y'all recall, I'm knitting in, I only have this much left because I'm almost done. This is Fully Spun, who does not dye yarn anymore, unfortunately. I literally mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, and then I went to their Instagram and they were having a going out of business sale. And this is the Genderqueer Pride that I got at Looped Fiber Works in Washington, D.C. And so, in case you can't tell, these are the colors for Queer Pride. It's a green, a white, and a really soft lavender, and I hope that's coming through well. The green is much bolder, but the lavender is a bit softer. And this is my 3rd ranunculus, and you can already see how drapey this is compared to this one, which I like both of them, but it's just a different feel. And especially this, I was just like, this is not what I was expecting from a superwash sock yarn. So this time I did do the proper cast on. I watched the video, and I already have a hard time watching videos. Like, I find I learn the best actually from reading instructions, strangely enough. And it's for me, it's most people do knitting tutorials in first person, and they have their knitting needles and you're watching their hands, and that makes complete sense, because then you can be like, this is my left hand, this is my right hand. But for me, I also need to see the front, because I need to see what their hands are like, what the whole picture is, because sometimes I don't know what to do with the rest of my hands and my fingers. And so I watched the video again. I watched it like 3 or 4 times, and I'm just like, I watched it in slow motion, which is a pro tip for YouTube tutorials. And I was just like, let me just go for it and just do it. And it finally clicks. I really just wanted it to click. And it's not that big of a difference. It does make a very stretchy cast on. The idea is that after you're done and you're blocking it, you can really stretch this out and, give it that oversized, slouchy feel, which I probably won't end up doing. I did not block this very aggressively. I washed it, laid it flat. And then when it was still just the tiniest bit damp, I put it on a hanger and just let the weight of the garment kind of pull everything open, because it is a super wash yarn and I don't want it to get super blown out. And I can already tell this one is going to be like, wee! It really reminds me of, let me know if you came of age between the years of like 1995 to like 2005, like if you were like Spice Girls, Lizzie McGuire type era. There were these shirts that were like almost like 3D. They like had like polyhedrons, and they would be about this size. And depending, like, they were like one size fits most, and depending on your body type, you could stretch them out and put them on. And if you watch Lizzie McGuire, you know what I'm talking about. And that's what this reminds me of. It's very, to borrow another pop culture reference from my generation, it's very Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Like, I am a 38 bust. It's got negative to no ease on me. I'm also a very tight knitter, so I said like the smallest size is like a, oh goodness gracious, there's a lot of pages in this pattern. You get to like the 5th page and they tell you the sizes. The smallest size is supposed to be a 46-inch bust, and this is like probably like spot on 40 to 41-inch bust. And so I'm a very tight knitter too. But like I said, I gave this to my niece, and it's a bit more slouchy on her. I could probably put this on my older daughter, who's about 7 years old, and it would be, even more of an oversized look on her. If you had a bigger chest, it definitely has a lot of stretch to it. If you're a little bit shorter, it'll be less cropped. If you're a little bit taller, it's going to be more cropped. But I think that's the real appeal of this pattern, is that it fits a lot of different aesthetics and a lot of different body types. It's very, adjustable. You can make the body as long as you want it. There are no rules. You can make the sleeves as long as you want them. If you do the long sleeve version, the pattern calls for like an I-cord bind off, which I have not done yet, because my intention with these was to have a one skein project, and this gets me, a little bit of ribbing here and a cropped body. If I wanted to do a full size, full length long sleeve, I probably would need at least 2 skeins of fingering yarn, so keep that in mind. As far as like, they give you some yardage guidance in the pattern. It's mostly yardage guidance because you can use different types of yarn, but for me, and my body type and the size I'm doing, 1 skein works fine just to get a t-shirt style crop top, which is perfect for me. But if you don't like the crop top look, or if you want it to be long sleeve or anything like that, you're going to probably need anywhere from, if you're using fingering weight yarn, 2 skeins. If you're using DK worsted, that's less yardage for, per ball of yarn. So you're probably going to need, 4 or 5 skeins of worsted weight. And that's actually some of the best ones I've seen. When I was going, my favorite thing to do is to go on Instagram and look at the hashtags, because I find the pictures to be much more accessible than Ravelry, and not just in the, the way that Ravelry is inaccessible to people, but So, people will take pictures of their sweater like laying flat, or it's a work in progress. When I go to Instagram, it just seems like I see a more diverse set of bodies, and I see bodies in motion. I see them doing different things, and so I can kind of get more of a grasp of what that's going to look like on my body. And so some of my favorites I've seen use usually a thicker yarn, because you could use a lace weight and it'll be like super drapey, super airy, super lightweight. But I think it looks really cool and like almost like a worsted weight. Like I think my favorite is inside the pattern. This person is wearing a size 8. And you probably can't see this because it's a black and white photo. But it's less ease in a thicker yarn. And I just think that looks really handsome. Like a very, it looks more, I guess, a traditional sweater. When it's with the thinner yarn, with more negative ease, it's more of like a kind of a hipstery, slouchy, grungy kind of look. I don't know if I'm using those words properly, but I do like less ease, thicker yarn. But I do appreciate that I can use my one skein of fingering weight. This one, I'm literally at the bottom, and now you can see the ribbing that's at the bottom. And I'm just going to go until I got, 2 to 3 grams left of this, and then I'll bind off. She has the directions in the pattern of how to do like her preferred method of a stretchy bind off. That was less important for me to learn because my, bind offs are, I hate to, like, they're a personal choice, but it's like, everyone has their way of binding off that gets. My nervousness with a stretchy bind off is it has that tendency to flare, and my favorite method of binding off is I knit the knits, pass the knit stitches over just like your most basic cast off, but I add a yarn over when I purl, and I find that gives it's not too stiff, but also doesn't do that flaring thing, which maybe the bind off in the pattern doesn't do that flaring thing, but it just felt like one more thing that I would have to learn to do this pattern. And it's funny because last year I didn't do certain things in the pattern just because my skill level wasn't there, and it's fun to see that I've grown as a knitter to the point where I'm not doing certain things in the pattern because I have my own way of doing things, because I am comfortable and I'm confident as a knitter. And so that's probably been the biggest thing I've noticed as far as, doing a pattern, a year later than the first time I did it. Overall, I do enjoy the pattern. I'm going to continue to make them. I had a lot of fun making it. The best thing about this pattern, if you're, didn't struggle like this second time around, I probably could have knitted one of these in a weekend. I'm not that type of person, one, because I don't really have the time to do that. Like if I did not have kids, didn't have a job, and I sat down for 2 days, I could probably knit this because it's that simple, that quick, that easy, and it's fun to knit. But I have 2 issues. One, whenever I come to a natural break in a pattern, I just take a break from it. Like I'll be like, oh, I cast it on, set it down. I finished the yoke, set it down. I got to the sleeve, set it down. I got to the other sleeve, set it down. Which makes it like, I knit blankets much faster than I knit like sweaters because like there's no natural break there. The second thing is this sweater is kind of like a metaphor for my high school education. I was a very studious student. I enjoyed school. I did well in school, but I had this thing where, you get an essay assigned to you, and I could write an essay in a weekend, but then I'd be like, oh, all I gotta do is write the conclusion. And I would literally wait till like the night before the assignment's done. They're like, oh, all I gotta do is like print it and format it. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like I would have the entire paper done and you'd be like, all right. And so I've kind of been knitting the bottom of this sweater for like days now when I could have finished it in one evening, just because that's just how my brain works. I'm just checking my notes to see if there's anything else. Like I said, I think it makes a great gift knit. Because it comes in a variety of sizes, fits a variety of bodies. I think it's recommended 10 centimeters of ease, and I think the biggest bust size we're going to be, is about 80-inch bust. So that means if you want to do the recommended 10 centimeters ease, you could be up to like a 70-inch bust and knit this pattern and still have the oversized look if that's what you were going for. But also, if you wanted a negative to no ease situation, you could be up to an 80-inch bust. So, as far as knitting patterns go, pretty inclusive. On the smaller side, like I said, my daughter could probably put this on and it would just be oversized, kind of, she's got more of like a preppy style to her, so she'd probably put like a little pair of white shorts and do her hair in a bun and have this little oversized sweater on with some cute sneakers. Definitely makes good. I could see myself going on like a road trip or traveling for work, riding Amtrak or something for work, and just taking a skein of fingering weight yarn with me and making one of these on a trip. Like, it's just interesting enough that you won't get bored. I usually bring like 2 to 3 projects with me when I go someplace, because I'm like, oh, what if I get bored with this? What if I get bored with this? But by the time you get bored of one section, you're on to the next section. If you have long stretches of time, that's probably the best time to do the yoke, just so you can keep count of all of your increases. But then, the times where you're tired and you're going back to the hotel, or you're, driving the car chatting, you can be doing the body, and that's just plain stockinette. Probably the biggest thing that takes concentration for me is that twisted rib and remembering to twist my knits, because, you've always been told not to twist your knits. So those are my thoughts on the ranunculus. Have you knit a ranunculus? Are you anti-ranunculus? Are you like, oh God, why is everyone talking about this pattern? I don't get it. Are you, I knit one and I wasn't that impressed? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I've really appreciated all the comments I've gotten. It's really changed my perspective doing YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTubers and I always like nervous to comment, or I'm like, oh, that sounds silly. I don't, or I don't want to waste their time with my thoughts, but then becoming a YouTuber and kind of like, you get a comment, you're like, oh wow, this is exciting. I don't care what you could say, I hate your sweater in the comments, and I'm like, ooh, someone wants to talk to me. I'm popular, So, definitely a shift in perspective on that. So I want to really thank everyone that's subscribed so far, everyone that's commented, everyone that's shared. I hope if you haven't done those things, that something I've said has moved you to do any of the YouTube things I've just mentioned. Also, you can follow me at Rulude on Instagram. I'm also Rulude on Ko-fi. You can send me a email, candibknittin@gmail.com. Until the next time, I'll be knitting a ranunculus. Tell me what you be knitting. Peace.